This is The Comms Exchange, a podcast by 3090 Marketing. Each episode, we sit down with colleagues, leaders, and changemakers to share stories and lessons from the field of community and economic development. Together, we explore how communications shapes strategy, builds trust, and drives momentum, because every project, every partnership, every breakthrough begins the same way, with a conversation.
Welcome to the Comms Exchange, where we explore the people and ideas shaping how we build, connect, and communicate. I'm Christianne Brunini.
I'm Rachel Ledet, and today's episode is all about what it looks like to build a construction brand that builds people and not just buildings.
We're joined by Wes Palmisano, founder and CEO of RNGD, a commercial construction firm that's grown from a team of 11 to a regional powerhouse doing more than $250 million a year in work across the Gulf South and beyond.
RNGD has been through multiple evolutions, Palmisano impetus, and now a unified RNGD brand. But the through line has really been culture. Think about 5 culture books, a full-blown Renegade Academy for leadership development, and now a $25 million headquarters facility that's literally designed around training, collaboration, and innovation in the prefab industry.
In this conversation, we're going to talk about why Wes chooses to invest in marketing and culture at the same level as operations, how those culture books and events shape the way people experience the brand, and how a company like RNGD thinks about return on investment when the product is people.
We will also get into the tension between being aspirational and staying grounded, the role of the Palmisano Foundation and all of those community partnerships and leadership philosophies that are shaping how RNGD develops its next generation of builders.
If you're a leader in AEC, or really any industry, trying to grow the business and your people at the same time, this one's for you.
So let's get into it. Wes, thank you for joining us today on the Comms Exchange.
Yeah, thank you for having me. Excited to be here.
Your company has been synonymous with innovation, and it's not just about how you build things. It's a lot tied to your investment and your interest in building your company's brand. What made you decide early on that investing in marketing, branding, and culture as a really key part of your business, not just on the operational side, but in totality? How did you know, and what made you really want to invest in that side of culture and brand building as part of your overall company strategy?
I came from a construction background and grew up working on tools. And so certainly the fundamentals of the business and the recognition that we needed to be able to execute was a big part of our founding. But at the same time, we recognized the importance of brand. And I think the early recognition was related to the fact that we were a young startup and most of our competitors were significantly more established than us. And so we knew that building a brand was our opportunity to really lean into the power of marketing and to use that to try to leverage our story and get our name out there and establish ourselves in the marketplace when most of the companies we were going up against had been in business for 50 or in some cases even over 100 years.
So at this point, RNGD has produced 5 culture books. We're proud to say, put the finishing touches on the last one. Each one captures a moment in the company's evolution. What role have these books played in shaping internal alignment and external perception?
Yeah, as also maybe related to our brand, our founding culture was also something that we knew was really important to the overall trajectory of the business. And early on, we tried to differentiate in terms of who we were culturally. And one of the ways that we did that was by publishing the first book, which happened in 2017. So we started in business in 13, grew dramatically. And the growth story was part of the reason that we felt the need to publish the book, because in our first 3 years in business, we went 0 to 100 million and we hired 100 people in that time frame. So, with 100 team members that we collected over the course of just 36 months, we saw and recognized clear need that we needed to create alignment and be really clear about who we are as an organization, what we want to accomplish. And we leaned heavily into culture and values, published that, and those foundational elements of our culture were published in the first book. And then as we continued to grow and evolve as an organization, which some of the later evolutions, I know you introduced in the beginning that we were a commercial construction company, which is what we were founded as. But since then, we've evolved and grown into many other service offerings and a significant element of self-perform capabilities. Big portion of our business today is in the infrastructure and heavy civil space. We also do prefabrication and structural steel, mechanical, electrical, plumbing, design and engineering. And so as this diverse organization, and as we've continued to grow and evolve, we then published books in 19, 21, and 23. But then the book that you just mentioned that we published this year in 25, which I know sounds like a lot because it was every 2 years, but that's because of the rapid growth and evolution of the organization. In 25, we wanted to publish something that actually took the place of the prior four and was a new way to capture who we were as an organization and all the things that we want to hold sacred and make sure that we maintain as we continue to grow and scale, that we're on the verge now of another rapid growth trajectory. And so between 25 and 30, as we continue to grow, we wanted to make sure that those elements of culture that have gotten us to where we are, that we continue to sustain those. And those books are an opportunity for our new team members that are joining us to learn about the organization, but at the same time for everyone on the team to hold the organizational accountable to staying true to who we are and being authentic as a brand and an organization and the culture of the company. We encourage people to actually call us out if they see us doing something that's not consistent with what we put in those books.
Yeah, it's really hard to replicate that, the initial bringing on of employees where you get to shake everybody's hand and interview everyone individually and really know them before they come on board. It's hard to scale that. And so having a tangible book that somebody can open and sort of have a piece of you that's speaking directly to them is a really unique opportunity to form that bond.
Today, we're actually on that point. Today, we're right on the verge and about to break another barrier or milestone, let's say, as an organization that we will, and we're knocking at the door of being at 500 people total. And so that 500 person threshold, it does sound like it's overwhelming in terms of the point you made about orientation and how do we bring people in and keep everyone aligned around our culture. But still, even today, as the founder, I consider one of my primary jobs to be the champion of our culture. And so we hand that book that you mentioned to each new team member. And then I still personally meet with everyone that joins the organization. In the beginning, those meetings were one-on-one. Now we do them in classes or cohorts. So we bring people in together and I meet with them individually and we talk about the things that are sacred and important to us as an organization. And we use storytelling as one of the primary mechanisms of how we reinforce what got us to where we are.
And there's definitely a lot of storytelling throughout that culture book series and also in your physical environment. So I'd like to switch gears a little bit to your very impressive new facility. It's gotten a lot of regional publicity as not just an outstanding office, but really a learning center, an innovation center, a manufacturing center that I believe you were attempting to pull everything in-house in one location so that you could really align people and have these classes and really get to meet with your teams together and have them cross collaborate as well. So I want to talk a little bit about your facility and the design intention around having something where you can do training and have collaboration and build this culture. How do you feel the built environment, especially as a contractor, can contribute and reinforce messages around brand alignment and consistency like you're describing? What does a building help or assist with in that way?
Yeah, the decision to move our headquarters was certainly a difficult one because, and I guess for those that don't know us, we built a headquarters that we moved into January 1st of 2018. So we built a brand new building and moved into it January 1st of 2018. And then here we are 6 years later, basically, talking about moving, which most people, including many in the organization, it's kind of funny to look back on because most people thought that we were a little crazy talking about moving because we were in a beautiful facility and headquarters that was downtown New Orleans. What we recognize is that the office that we built in the year of 17, which was early in our trajectory as an organization that we moved into in 18, was set up to be a commercial general contractor. And so back to the story that I shared a minute ago and the evolution of our service offerings and how we've evolved as a company, we didn't feel like that office was representative of and authentic to who we were as an organization as we've continued to evolve. And so we moved to a facility and a headquarters now that gives us the ability to really come together and lean into and be authentic as an organization, leaning into the trajectory of where we're headed and where our business plan is taking us, which is a significant amount of manufacturing, self-perform capabilities, where we needed space. We've got a large equipment fleet now, as an example, needed space for that. We have steel fabrication facilities that we needed space for, prefabrication shops and facilities. And so all these logistical things that were that are a core part of the business today that weren't back in 2017 caused us to evolve. And we wanted to lean into that, make sure that we're being authentic. So the new headquarters is in an industrial environment. We are on 14 acres, 150,000 square feet of building. And so that's certainly a much different facility in makeup than what we were in previously. And even though the old office was amazing, it was just an office. And this one is a completely different version of that. And the other aspect of the new headquarters that was important to us that we didn't have is our training center. And the new training center itself is 25,000 square feet and leans into both craft and trade-based training, as well as leadership training programs that are part of our self-branded Renegade Academy and another element of the business. And so, the headquarters has been amazing. We moved in January 1st of this year. So we're coming up on a year now in the new facility. And for all of our team members, it's been embraced and has certainly been a big part of what I think we'll look back on as a milestone in the trajectory of our business and another chapter in our growth story. And of course, I've enjoyed it. I love being part of these projects. And so, the design and, maybe the design side or the marketing and the very intentional aspects of the project that are related to our culture are something that were near and dear to me. How the facility looks, the feeling you get when you're driving by on the street in the front, but also walking in the front door. And so there are a lot of intentional, very extremely intentional little details that we wanted to get right in the headquarters and the message that it sends. That's also consistent with our brand and the culture of the company.
So that kind of leads into my next question, which is, we're so lucky to work with you because you get it, right? You get the marketing piece of it and you love it. You're building intentionally an internal team as well as leaning on an external team. So that just shows how broadly you see the vision and the value. Sometimes that return on investment is more anecdotal. So how could you help someone else see that bottom line investment is a true investment and how to appreciate that reward? Is that something you could lean into?
Yeah. So a quick sidebar, that's a funny story that our team loves to share. The people who are with the organization at the beginning get a little bit of a laugh out of it, but the first expense that we incurred as an organization back in our founding, which was April 9th of 2013, the first expense that we incurred was a marketing and branding agency. And I think that is one that was an unconventional decision for a construction company. And the team members who were with me at the time were mostly operationally leaning. And so, they're thinking, why aren't we buying tools and equipment and, normal construction stuff? And instead, we hired what at the time was a big expense for a new startup. We hired a marketing and branding agency to help us get it right because we knew it was important. And so, as I've looked at that over the years and setting aside that beginning story, which honestly, I think on that one, in terms of ROI or real world example, I think that decision is one of the big elements of our success that ultimately 3 years later, I mentioned this earlier, we were doing 100 million, which is kind of unheard of in our industry to grow that rapidly at the beginning of a startup as a construction company. And so I think part of that growth was certainly an element of getting brand right and finding a way to compete with companies who are significantly more established than you are, both as a brand and I guess from an execution perspective as well, being significantly more experienced. And so as I've looked at it, brand, of course, gives you an opportunity to differentiate in a very competitive business. It can make you where you're not a commodity so that you are selling work that is not necessarily just based on price. And, as I think about brand and the value, maybe to pull it together and summarize, I think brand can build trust. Trust is how you increase speed and growth. And that speed and growth trajectory is what creates ROI for a construction company.
Well said.
It's a great answer. And we agree. Between your foundation's annual concert, the community partnerships and sponsorships that you participate in, how you celebrate your team, you've created this aspirational brand that many companies do look up to. How do you balance authenticity with the growth and ambition so that you stay grounded while you're hitting that 500th employee? Because it really is a balance to look at a scaling objective, but also make sure that things feel true to self.
Yeah. The one of it, well, I guess I think about that and I'll tie in multiple ways maybe. And one is that giving back to the communities where we do business has been part of who we are and part of our culture from the beginning. We started with a project very early on that was a community-based initiative and project. And in those days, I can certainly look at it and say, we were just getting started, and certainly financially, we're not necessarily in a position to make those commitments, but we did it anyway because we knew it was the right thing to do. Fast forwarding from there, we made it formal by creating the 501c3. We now have 35 kids on scholarship. And so there's a very intentional tie. And like everything else we do, there's a strategy behind what we're doing, which our goal and the purpose of the foundation is to help kids go from middle school to stable employment in architecture, engineering, construction professions. And so we, in many cases, are working with a partnership with another nonprofit, which we work with a number of other nonprofits in a partnership arrangement to help facilitate some of their programming through schools. And then on the back end, we have trade-based or 2-year trade degrees and 4-year college degrees for people to move into the architecture, engineering, construction professions. And so the foundation has been a key to helping others while also maybe finding great candidates. And so certainly there's an element of that, the foundation strategically tying to the growth of the organization as well as our academy. And so our academy program is also tied into the Renegade Academy. Being more leadership development is also tied into some of the programming that we're doing through the nonprofit side of the business. And of course, the for-profit side, which is the construction company. And so all those work hand in hand and in conjunction with each other in how we've always viewed the business and the foundation. And our goal of what originally our purpose as we got started was building a better world. That's evolved a little bit. And today we call it revolutionizing how we build, which there are 4 elements of revolutionizing how we build and how we talk about it, which is revolutionizing how we build people, which is the academy, revolutionizing how we build projects, which is innovation and who we are as an organization, revolutionizing how we build for the industry, which again is innovation because we feel like the construction industry can do better as a whole. And then revolutionizing how we build communities, which is the nonprofit, the physical nature of the work we do, and how we give back. And so I think really when I think about it from an authenticity perspective, and as we've continued to scale and grow as an organization, and how do we remain authentic, it's really through, number one, authenticity has to be real. And it's not just a saying on the wall, or a set of values that you just print on a piece of paper. It has to be lived and breathed in the organization every day to stay alive. So our very intentional purpose, core values, and then the behaviors of the team and people really being bought into who we are as an organization. We've always looked at our values as almost a set of guardrails that, those are the rules of the game, I guess is the way that I've typically explained it. And just like if you decide to play a sport, you have to play by the rules of the game. And if you don't want to play by the rules of the game, you really shouldn't play the sport. And so it's kind of the same way for us as an organization, that we expect and hold our team accountable that they live by those values. And if they don't want to, then, maybe there's another place for them. Just, it's hard to really look at it another way. And so we are really intentional about our culture and our values. And we've also paused. I guess that's another one that I guess it stands out as part of our growth trajectory, that we've grown and then I guess you could call it plateaued, but leveled off for a period of time to make sure that we're catching up with the growth and we're getting aligned as a team with systems, culture, values. There's a lot that has to happen in the background before you take the next step in growth. And so our growth and the way we've looked at our organizational development has really been in chapters where we have high growth, we take a little bit of a breather to get everybody aligned, and then we grow again. We take another breather. So we've had 3 chapters so far as an organization of growth, and we're just at the beginning of and starting the 4th phase of our growth over the entire history of our organization. And this 4th phase that we're heading into is extremely exciting. And one of the, maybe for us, a little bit of a commandment of growth is that we're not going to grow if we can't maintain our culture as we continue to scale.
Well, speaking of chapters, as I was thumbing through the chapters of your culture book, I can certainly hear and see that the intertwining of high level thinkers and leadership philosophies that are stepping on each other and then intertwining and lacing beautifully. Do you want to share about some leadership philosophies or books that have inspired you? What are you reading right now? What's on your nightstand? And what advice would you give to others who are striving for this same kind of operational excellence?
We started early on with some business authors that inspired us. And in those days, of course, we had, like many startups, we were on a shoestring budget. We were out and we were always, I guess, one theme and part of our culture is a growth mindset, having a culture of learning. And so as a team and as a group, we started very early on reading together and being inspired by information that was available to us. And so some of those that inspired us early on, Simon Sinek, Patrick Lencioni, Jim Collins. And so some of those traditional, how to put a system in place, how to have values and purpose as a business. So Simon Sinek inspired us with his Start With Why. Patrick Lencioni from a team and culture perspective, Jim Collins, business systems. And so some of those were foundational for the business. And we learned a lot through reading and studying those as a team together. But then fast forwarding a little bit, I went on a little bit of a pilgrimage, I guess you could call it, where I was in a phase for about 5 years of traveling around the country and studying other construction companies, because I mean, a lot of companies that are really good at what they do. And we've always approached things with a ton of humility and knowing that we can learn a lot from the other companies and people around us. And so I had the unique opportunity and great fortune to be able to visit with other leaders in the industry. And one of the ones that really stands out for me is in 2018, I went out to California and visited with Doug Woods, the founder of DPR Construction. And DPR was one of the firms that inspired me. I read a lot about them. I studied him as a founder and a leader, and then had the opportunity to go spend some time with him. And so that's an example of, and there are many others like that, of intentionally going out and learning from companies that are significantly more well-run, better operated, much bigger, certainly going in with an extremely humble perspective of knowing that we have a lot to learn if we're going to continue to grow and scale. And so we sought out the best in the business to go learn from. So that was maybe kind of next phase. And then most recently, we've started to try to continue to improve our academy offerings and spread knowledge within our organization. One of the recent programs we did was actually in a kind of off-campus experience, but one of the professors from Harvard Business School that we brought our team up to Boston and had an experience with one of the Harvard Business School professors that has been inspirational to me as an individual in my continued growth and studying. And so I think just that culture of learning has served us well, and everyone in our organization embraces that. And it's really inspiring to see and watch where at the field level, we have many different crews that are having learning moments every morning. They're studying together. They're following, whether it's podcast or learning about general business principles. I mean, it's all things that don't necessarily apply to what they're doing on the job site. And it's just amazing to see the evolution in people when everyone in the organization is pushing together, and we all collectively have this growth and learning mindset.
Yeah, it's hard to picture what's next if you're not open to exploring those ideas and thinking outside of your day-to-day motions. Well, this has been really great, and we're going to move on to our next phase of this podcast. So we do have a little speed round, and I want to kick it off with going back to talking about your new headquarters. Do you have a favorite little nook or place or viewing spot that is special to you, and why?
Dad, I know this is supposed to be really fast, but
You can take your time. It's fast-ish.
we made a decision to not have any walls in the building. So I'm laughing a little bit because you're asking about a special spot or a nook, and there's really nowhere to hide because we don't have any walls in the building. But that was by design. But if I had to pick a space, every morning you can find me in our gym that's in the headquarters. And so I definitely find time to unplug and work out. And they're usually, it's kind of open access. And so you never know who you're going to run into in there. And there's a lot of great moments and opportunities to connect and talk about what's going on in those mornings in the gym together.
I think there are walls in the gym. I think that might be the one area where there's a few walls.
Yeah, it is a room. It is a room because the music's usually loud and we didn't want that spilling out into the rest of the building.
Well, and so maybe there's something that's a whole other podcast, but I do believe that you sort of have this wellness aspect to like the total human approach that I'm assuming, but I think I know about you, that you have that as an offering at your place of work because it's important to you that you and your people have access to a place to not just work on the mind, but work on the body, because we know that that little engine all chugs together. So, and it is a pretty amazing gym space. So I love that answer. What do you think, question 2, is one of the biggest branding mistakes that large contractors make?
Well, I don't know if this is the answer you want to hear. I made a mistake, I would say, by going down the route of thinking that it was a good idea for us to be a house of brands instead of a branded house. And so I went down this path of maybe listening to too many people instead of my own gut. I had a variety of consultants that I've worked with and a lot of different opinions. And at the end of the day, I think my mistake was not being true and authentic. And so I think there are so many opportunities, and we're always learning and finding ways to grow and improve, and certainly are willing to admit when we make mistakes as part of our culture. And so for myself, from a leadership perspective, we published the RNGD brand actually in 18, and there was maybe a little bit of a fear of using it because we thought it was maybe too edgy. And so we were using it for some of our services. And then ultimately, 5 years later is basically the evolution that it took. And 5 years later, after going down this path of having multiple brands, we just decided to embrace it because it was really the authentic version of who we were as an organization. And so, I've certainly made my share of mistakes in the world of marketing and branding. And that was one of them.
Well, I think that's an interesting perspective. And if nothing else, it shows that brands are evolutionary, and sometimes it takes a pause to say, let's look around and figure out who we are. And I think one time you had told me that some of the guys were wearing t-shirts and hats of RNGD who weren't necessarily in that division. And so there was something about the spirit of it that was like inking throughout your organization, and that sometimes it takes a moment to just say, what are we really, and what really feels right to people, and letting yourself be fluid enough that you can pivot when you want to grab onto something that feels authentic. And so I think while that might be your quick response to the brand mistake question, it really is sort of a brand success question, because you took the pause, you asked the questions, and sometimes feeling is what the answer is to know that feeling. So I do actually really like that answer.
Yeah. That was one of our values from January of 2014, we published our values. So we started in April of 13. In January of 14, we published values. Renegade mentality was one of those. And so it was with us from the beginning. And it was something that people really rallied around. They just love being renegades. And so, certainly I knew that. But at the same time, it certainly can be seen as really edgy, especially in an industry like construction, where you have a lot of well-established and competitors that have been around a long time. My concern, of course, was what is always being really client-oriented and externally focused. What are our clients going to think about hiring a bunch of renegades to come do their project? And so there was definitely that element that came into play that I was concerned about, just because we were already the newcomer, and then probably emphasizing that even more so by saying we're a bunch of renegades.
Well, it seems to be working. So that gut instinct was telling you something right in the beginning. So speaking of gut instincts, what is your biggest green flag when you meet a future leader?
That one's tough, because I always find that it's hard to point to one thing. And there's so many people in our organization that are successful for different reasons, and everyone is unique as an individual. And we find people that have success with many different qualities. But one of our early lessons that we learned, and something that we look at often that works in our organization, our culture, is Patrick Lencioni's ideal team player model. People that are humble, hungry, smart. And so, smart, not in terms of intelligence, but smart in terms of people skills, humble and hungry. So they're great team players, because our organization is extremely collaborative.
Okay, last question. What is one piece of advice that your father or grandfather has left with you that you think about often?
See, I grew up with a tremendous value and respect for the traditional paths of the construction industry. Having grown up in a family that has worked in construction since 1950, and being a third generation entrepreneur myself, a lot of those old lessons have been inspirational to me, which I look at the foundational past of the industry, and the things that stand out are really the value of hard work and the value of integrity and doing what you say you're going to do. And so those two things are things that I learned from both my grandfather and my father, that were just ingrained in me from a young age, that have served us well as an organization. Even though we are forward leaning and innovative as an organization and a company, we certainly know that those foundational elements of the industry are just as important.
Wonderful.
Well, we want to thank you so much for your time today. It is so valuable and so precious. And it's been a real treat to be able to sit down with you and hear your thoughts on branding and building a great brand in construction. So thank you.
Yeah, glad to be here. Thank you.
Thank you, Wes. Look forward to talking with you again soon about some of your 2026 objectives. And thank you for being on our show today and letting us bend your ear a little bit and get some advice and inspiration from you. So thanks for joining us.
Yeah, thank you. We've got big plans and a lot of exciting things coming in 26.
I suppose we should say, where can someone find you?
I'm on LinkedIn in terms of social media platforms. I think that's the only one. But at the same time, you can reach me also through our website at our office, or through LinkedIn.
Yeah, so if our viewers want to go check out more about RNGD, you can go to rngd.com and also find the company on LinkedIn and also on Instagram and Facebook. There's lots of updates to check out what they're doing at work and in the communities around them. Thank you.
All right. Thank you.
Thanks for listening to The Comms Exchange, a podcast by 3090 Marketing. If you enjoyed today's conversation, please be sure to follow or subscribe so you don't miss out on an exciting new episode. We'll be back soon with more stories and strategies from the field, because every breakthrough begins with a conversation.